Chapter 11. Training. 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ashton didn't know why Donovan was so hateful towards him. But after what happened in the room, Donovan had definitely made it to the list of bast.ards Ashton wanted to kill as soon as he got the chance to do so. But for now, he had to control his emotions. He would get his revenge later. Right now he needed to focus on strengthening himself as Lucifer had told him to. Thankfully, Donovan has been kind enough to take care of his training. After the glass shard had been pulled out from his body, they were on their way outside. We will walk to the training room. Donovan mumbled as soon as Ashton was all healed up. It is located outside the main building, so we will need to walk for a bit. While we are at it, these people will tell you about the castle as well as the kingdom. You better remember what they tell you or you will have another disciplinary session after finishing your training for the day. Don't call it disciplinary session when it's actually, let me satisfy my fetish session. Ashton smirked, but as he did he was smacked hard across the face. You half-blood mutt, you dare talk back to Sir Donovan. It was one of the guards who slapped him. I shall teach you some. Stop it, Drake. Donovan stopped the man before he could smack Ashton again. The brat will soon learn his place in our society. He's a newborn, wolf blood might be driving him crazy. Just do what I told you to. He will learn his lesson during his training. As you wish, sir. Ashton had been living inside the mistress mansion for a little over 4 days now, but it was the first time he was actually seeing the castle. Even though he did not want to admit it, the place she lived in was beautiful. Drake had been gracious enough to let Ashton know about the castle. Apparently, the castle was surrounded by 10 ivory towers, constructed in a semi-circle. These towers were the primary source of defense for the castle and were manned 24/7. Furthermore, these towers were connected to each other with firm walls that were of the same color as flax and had been made of the strongest material they could find in the recent era. Monster bones. These walls served various purposes. The first was obviously for defense, the second was to connect the towers with each other for quick transportation of soldiers and goods, and the final use was to serve as barracks for the troops to live in. Thousands of rooms had been constructed inside the walls to serve as barracks for the quick deployment of troops in case of an emergency. As for the main castle where the mistress lived, it was the single biggest structure Ashton had ever seen in his life. But for some reason, Drake only gave him a rough view of how the castle looked from the inside as they finally made their way outside. The sun was brighter than it had ever been, or maybe it was the effect of Ashton's eyes suddenly becoming more sensitive to everything around him. Ashton thought the sun wouldn't affect him as he had deactivated the vampire traits within his body, but he was wrong. Just because he deactivated the traits, didn't mean the genes within his body had disappeared altogether. Deactivating the traits would only help him in concealing his identity and efficiently leveling up the other traits. However, deactivating the vampire traits helped him somewhat tolerate the pain of being sun-kissed, which was nothing less than poison for vampires. You are under the presence of the sun. The vampire genes lying dormant within your body are reacting to it. While under the sun/UV rays, your stats will be nerfed. Stats. HP, 1000. 850 damage. 14. 9 armor. 12. 8 stealth. 5. 4 stamina. 15. 10 agility. 14. 9 intelligence. 2. Ashton was in pain, but he had to tolerate it. If he were to show the pain he was in, it wouldn't take Donovan long to join the dots and figure out his identity. Lucifer had already told him, no matter what, he had to protect his identity or both of them would get killed by the higher-ups, whoever they might be. That 5-minute walk to the training facility had caused his excruciating pain, but it was thanks to that. His pain tolerance leveled up to level 2. It takes about a minute for the pain to subside even after I am no longer under the sun. Ashton took some deep breaths as soon as they were inside the facility, however. I need to do something about it. The pain tolerance might help me get rid of the pain, but what about my nerfed stats? Ashton was lost in his thoughts. He had assumed just turning off the traits would help conceal his identity, but it was going to be harder than he initially thought. On top of that, he now had to think of a way to save himself for the stat debuff. Lycans were a hunting race, and most of the hunts were organized during the day. And since he was now a member of their dog community, he would eventually have to hunt during the day as well, but having his stats nerfed could actually put him in danger. Here, take these. Donovan returned with a sword and a shield in his hands and handed them to Ashton, interrupting his train of thoughts. We need to figure out which weapons would suit you the best, and for that, you'll have to use them all in the simulation room. Got it. Ashton took the longsword and the wooden shield and entered the room Donovan pointed at. Sir Donovan, do you want the kid to die or something? Drake asked him. A wooden shield wouldn't even be able to take a single hit from those creatures, and as for the sword, it's not the preferred weapon to fight against those. On top of that, it might be a simulation room, but the pain one would feel inside the tower is real. Why are you getting all worried about the brat? Donovan smiled as the camera turned on. You're the one who told me to punish him. So I'm just punishing him for opening his mouth before. Now shut up and enjoy while that bast.ard withers in pain and confusion. Chapter 12. Level Up. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A few moments ago. As Ashton walked into the simulation room, it slowly turned into a dark forest. It was so realistic that if Ashton hadn't seen the simulation room with his eyes, he would not have believed that this place wasn't a forest all along. However, the forest had been unervingly motionless. Not a single leaf was moving, leaving the forest to be in dead silence. That put Ashton on the edge. His ears perked up, and thanks to his enhanced hearing while he was in werewolf form, he could hear something was rapidly approaching him. He steadied himself to counter-attack whoever it was, but since it was his first time fighting, he had no idea how was he even supposed to wield the sword or the shield. As the mysterious creature got closer to him, the stench of rotting flesh and blood filled his nostril. The smell was already bad enough, and his enhanced sense of smell made it even worse. Ashton could feel the creature get closer to him. However, by the time the creature appeared in his sight, he had been so disorganized that he couldn't even lift his sword in time. The next moment, he got thrown away with extreme swiftness and ended up hitting the stump of a tree. The pain would have been much worse if his resistance hadn't kicked in. It was thanks to that Ashton was about to dodge the creature's next attack and swiftly rolled out of its way as the creature once again disappeared in the darkness. That was also when Ashton finally got the first look at his opponent. The creature appeared to be human, only his flesh was rotting from various places as rotten blood oozed out of various blisters that were spread all across the creature's body. It walked on all fours like dogs did a little over a century ago and didn't have a single hair across his body. Numerous bones were protruding through its back, which can be used for both defense and offense. Living in imprisonment for all his life had made it so that he had no knowledge about the creature he was up against. Thankfully, the black light in front of him, or the blessing as it was called by everyone else, showed him some information about the beast he was facing. Just by looking at the beast, a screen popped open in front of his eyes. On the screen, there was a picture of a similar looking beast, while important information about the creature was mentioned underneath the picture. Name: Ghoul species. Zombie status. Mindless undead class. Scavenger age. Nil gender. Nil grade. F.tier affiliation. Unassigned level. 1 stats. HP 800/800 damage. 10 armor. 5 stealth. 7 stamina. 10 agility. 19 intelligence. 1 nature. Chaotic. 5% chance of inflicting 2% additional damage after using a skill. Abilities/skills/spells. Terror Bite, Grievous Claw, Pine Attack. Remark. A disgusting-looking son of a bit.ch which can turn out to be a pain for newbies, if not handled swiftly. Just by looking at its face, one could say it did not have a peaceful end, but then again someone with horrendous body odor like this idiot didn't deserve a peaceful end in the first place. The least dangerous yet the most common kind of undead that can be found munching on the corpse of almost any creature in the wastelands or forests. As for its weakness, using fire-based spells or enchanted gear are the quickest way to take it down. If you don't possess either of those, powerful blunt attacks from hammers or similar weapons can take care of it as well. However, slashing and piercing weapons like swords and spears do not work against them as they pass right through their rotting flesh and would only do minimal damage to the ghoul. Back to the present. The sweat on Ashton's arm made it very difficult for him to form a proper grip around the sword. The situation was so bad that every time he used the sword to attack the simulated beast, the sword rolled away from his hand and no damage was done to the beast. Ashton knew the sword was useless against the ghoul, but it was the only weapon he had to fight back the creature. Also, in hindsight, it wasn't the fault of his sweaty hands that the sword kept rolling away. It was the fault of the sword itself as it had no grip. The hilt of the sword was incomplete, but judging from how old the sword looked, it was entirely possible that it was a sword that was broken and shouldn't have been any longer used to take the beasts on, in the first place. As for his shield, well, it was a dud as well. Ashton thought he could use the shield to deal blunt damage to the ghoul. However, before he could put his theory into action, just one hit from the ghoul blew the shield into small pieces. Damn it! Ashton exclaimed as he tried to jump back and dodge the ghoul's attack. But he was too late. His reflexes didn't trigger on time and as a result, the ghoul bit into his calf. Ashton felt like the glass shard once again had pierced his flesh, only this time the ghoul's bite force made the worse for him. The pain tolerance helped, but it was clear this kind of pain was much above the pay grade of the low-level tolerance he had. You have received 30 HP damage from the ability, Terror Bite. You have been poisoned from the ability, Terror Bite. You'll lose 2 HP/SEC for the next 5 seconds. As if the pain wasn't enough, he got poisoned as well. But Ashton didn't sit there while the ghoul chewed on his left leg. He started kicking the ghoul's head with all the might he could muster, using his other leg. After 3 or 4 frantic adrenaline-filled kicks from him, the ghoul let his leg go and rushed back into the darkness of the forest yelping like a dog. It would seem like his kicks dealt more damage to the ghoul than the sword did. However, with a leg like that, he was in no position to continue fighting anymore. Still, he had received orders from Donovan to kill the beast and only then would he be allowed to come out of the simulation room. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom there. After all, thanks to the ghoul's bite, he received 2 more passive abilities. Poison Resistance, LVL1, and Hemorrhage Resistance, LVL1. The former reduced the effect of poison by 2% while the latter ability reduced the blood loss due to a wound by 1%. FCK if only there was a self-healing ability as well. Damn it. Chapter 13. Level Up. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You have received 20% EXP from being attacked by ghoul. You'll level up once your EXP reaches 100%. You'll grow stronger as you level up. Current EXP 20%, what the heck is this? Ashton blurted out after patching his open wound with the help of leaves, I can get stronger by being hit. Ashton had forgotten that Lucifer wasn't with him to answer his queries. Thus he had to find his own answers from whatever information he was presented with. And according to the information flashing in front of his eyes, it was clear he could earn EXP by being attacked by monsters. If that's the case, why didn't I get any EXP when Donovan slammed me on top of those glass shards? That was hell of a pain. He thought to himself, is there some criterion which needed to be filled for me to gain EXP? Or is it something else? It was indeed weird. He did not gain anything except the pain tolerance skill when Donovan attacked him. A few theories popped up in his head that could have explained why it was so. One of the theories he came up with was that Donovan didn't directly harm him. After all, unlike the ghoul who sunk its teeth in his flesh, Donovan didn't physically cause him any harm. The pain Ashton felt was due to the glass shards burying themselves inside his flesh and not by Donovan stepping on him. Another theory Ashton had was pretty simple. It could be possible that Donovan wasn't a monster in the system's vision like the ghoul was. So maybe that's why his attack didn't reward him with EXP. Although, personally he believed this theory to be false, as werewolves were just as much of a monster as the ghoul was. That brought Ashton to his third theory. The intention behind the creature's attack. It was a bit far-fetched, but this theory could explain why he didn't receive EXP when Donovan attacked him, better than anything he could come up with. It was possible that while Donovan wanted to hurt him, but not kill him, thus Ashton didn't get any EXP. This was true because the mistress would have never allowed him to be killed after personally converting him into a werewolf. The ghoul, on the other hand, was definitely out to kill him and hence his attack gave him EXP. Still, there was a high probability that the actual reason behind it was something completely different from what he was thinking. I can always figure it out later. But for now, I have to think of a way to get rid of the ghoul. Ashton slowly got up and carefully looked around himself to see if there was something usable there or not. There were only two ways to kill a ghoul as the system informed him. Either by using fire or by using bludgeoning them to death. Thus the sword he had was completely useless as neither it was an enchanted weapon, nor could it do any severe damage to the ghoul. This forced Ashton to look for alternatives, like a broken branch or something that he could use as a club to fight against the ghoul. However, it didn't look like the ghoul was going to give him any chance to come up with a strategy. The ghoul was prowling around Ashton like a sly wolf preying on its dinner. The taste of Ashton's blood was still fresh in its mouth and it wanted more. The ghoul jumped at him while Ashton's back was turned at him. But this time, Ashton was prepared. Even though the ghoul had a higher level than him, Ashton was stronger than the ghoul in terms of everything except agility. Still, Ashton had formed a plan to use the creature's agility against it to kill it. He was already aware that the ghoul was prowling around him as his ears could pick up the slightest of noises. That's why he used the time he had to slowly move and stand in front of a tree. As soon as the ghoul tried to jump him, Ashton dodged the attack at lightning speed. If I can't use blunt weapons to kill you, then I'll force you to kill yourself. Ashton smiled as the ghoul hit its head right into the tree stump. His plan was simple. The ghoul was more agile than him, but not as intelligent. If he stood in front of trees and huge boulders, then he could easily defeat the ghoul. It was in the ghoul's nature to attack an injured prey from behind. By attacking them from behind, not only will the ghoul be able to attack their nape and kill humans immediately, it would also be difficult for the prey to defend its back. Ashton was only exploiting that simple fact. Ashton got the idea to do this from one of the tales he had heard. The old folks from the enclosure often talked about the tales their parents told them, and one of the tales Ashton had heard as a youngster was about a sport that existed long before the virus spread across the world. It was called bullfighting. Ashton had never seen what a bull looked like as they went extinct after the virus spread, just like a lot of other creatures. But from what he could imagine from the stories, they were these big herbivorous creatures that had the strength to take on any number of humans. Thus these creatures were used in some kind of strange sports where they would charge at humans while both of them were locked inside an arena. The game was simple, the bull would attack the humans and the humans would dodge the attack. What Ashton was doing was exactly that. Only in his case, the bull had been replaced by a ghoul instead. You have obtained a new skill. Battle Tactics, LVL1. Battle Tactics, LVL1. A rare ability generally found in humanoid creatures. This skill allows the user to enter a state of extreme focus. The attacks of enemies look slower, allowing the user to easily dodge the attacks. New perks will unlock when the skill level increases. Grade. Low condition to upgrade the skill. Defeat 3 creatures having a higher level than yours. Keep giving me more skills. The more the merrier, right? Chapter 14. Level Up. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. FCK just die already. Ashton, curse it out loud. The ghoul's head had been split open from bashing his head again and again into trees and boulders. It was the 10th time Ashton lured the ghoul and dodged the attack at the last moment. However, the ghoul turned out to be the more resilient creature he had ever seen. No matter how many times the ghoul ended up injuring himself, it kept on attacking Ashton. Although apart from the ghoul's resilience, it wasn't all that bad because every time Ashton dodged the ghoul's attack he gained some EXP. The amount of EXP he gained depended on how closely he was able to dodge the attack. Whenever he dodged the ghoul's attack he gained anywhere between 2.3% EXP. Thanks to that, his EXP had increased from 20% to 42%. Apart from the EXP he had gained there, Ashton had only wasted his time. He needed to get rid of this ghoul but he couldn't do anything about it. At one time he tried to punch the ghoul, but the ghoul had ended up almost biting his arm off. My leg has started to act up again. Ashton mumbled as the blood once again started oozing out of the wound. The hemorrhage resistance was trying to do its job, but there was only so much the ability could do. Jumping around while being injured wasn't a fun thing to do. Dodging the attacks had reopened his semi-sealed wound. But dodging was the only thing he could do if he wanted to defeat the ghoul. On the other hand, the ghoul's condition wasn't all that good either. It had finally started to wobble around. However, despite being in that sorry state, the ghoul still lunged at Ashton who barely managed to dodge the attack. Just like before the ghoul once again bashed his head on a tree stump, but this time the collision was harder than it had been before. You have received 2% EXP from dodging an attack. Current EXP 44%. With a loud cracking noise, Ashton noticed that the entire left part of the ghoul's skull had fallen apart. He could see the rotten blackish-red brain of the creature as a part of the skull keep dangling on the side. The brain was an important part, even if one was undead. This is my chance. The sword might not have worked before, but now since the brain of the ghoul was exposed, Ashton could finally put an end to the fight. His eyes were shining as he finally got a glimpse of hope of defeating the creature. The only problem was that he needed his sword to end the battle, and the sword was near the creature's feet. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. Ashton remembered the saying his father often used to tell him, and readied himself for the battle. You have activated the skill. Battle Tactics. As he activated the skill, he could feel everything around him slowing down. From the rustling of the leaves to the crunching of the dried sticks on the ground, everything was super slow. Ashton rushed over towards the ghoul. The pain tolerance helped him focus on the task at hand rather than worrying about the pain in his legs. The ghoul lashed out, its claws shot towards Ashton. But before the claws could get to him, Ashton dived and dodged the attack. He grabbed the sword while rolling on the ground and slashed away the ghoul's arm in half before using the tree stump as a ramp to jump over the ghoul and ramming the sword into the exposed part of the ghoul's head. Ashton wasn't done yet. He then twisted the sword while it was still buried in the ghoul's head and ended up ripping his head off the rest of the torso. The ghoul let out a final scream before collapsing on the floor. Dead, for real this time. You have received 60% EXP by killing a ghoul. Current werewolf level. 1. You have leveled up. EXP limit has been reset. All wounds have been healed. Current werewolf skill points. 1. Current EXP 0%. It all happened in mere moments, but to Ashton, it seemed like a minute had passed. He had achieved the kill and now. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. No matter what everyone else said about him killing a werewolf when he was 12, to him, the ghoul was his first kill. He was tired but there was this rush within his body. A feeling he couldn't describe, but he wanted to feel it more. He wanted to relive it again and again, and the only way to do so was to kill some more. However, before he could do anything, the simulation ended abruptly. Everything vanished from the room. The only things remaining were his broken gears, him, and the corpse of the ghoul. Wait a minute. Wasn't the ghoul supposed to be a part of the simulation? It should have disappeared with the forest, right? As he was looking at the ghoul's corpse in disbelief, the door leading to the simulation room was thrown open and the mistress rushed inside. She was closely followed by Donovan and a dozen bodyguards. All of them had weapons in their hands and started searching the room for something while the mistress squatted down to inspect the corpse of the ghoul. The grave look on her face made Ashton think he had done something wrong. I want to know, how the hell a living ghoul found its way inside the training tower. The mistress yelled in rage before turning towards Donovan. Donovan, did you not even bother to check inside the room to see it was safe for him to train or not? Sorry, mistress. I slap. Without a moment's hesitation, the mistress slapped Donovan right across the face. The mark of her fingers was printed on his cheek as everyone stood there dumbfounded. It was the first time the mistress had raised her hand on Donovan. I don't want any excuses. Find the culprit who did this, and you, she pointed towards Ashton, follow me. We need to have a chat. Chapter 15. The color of your blessing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The mistress left everyone behind and almost dragged Ashton to her chamber. In contrast to the rest of the mansion, the mistress's room was surprisingly simple. It wasn't even as big as the room he was living in and didn't have much furniture either. Just a bed and a couple of closets. The wooden floor was the only thing in the entire room that matched the rest of the mansion. Otherwise, Ashton would have thought he wasn't in the mistress's room but a room of one of her servants. Does she want me to feel bad about her? Ashton rolled his eyes. If she is, then she is going about it the wrong way. I might pity her when I'm about to kill her. Nope, not even then. I would be too busy enjoying it than pity her. Sit anywhere you like. I'll be with you in a minute. After saying so, she disappeared into a room that Ashton guessed was a washroom. He had heard from the guards about how women always take too long in the washroom to do whatever they did in there, and he wasn't going to sit still for that long. Also, he was in the mistress's room alone. He might not ever get a chance like this to snoop around. However, even before he could put his thoughts into action, the mistress was already out of the room with a strange looking box in her hand which she handed to him. Here, take this. It's a first aid kit. It has herbs, lotion and other useful things to heal you. She said as she sat down next to him, I assume you have got to know about what blessing is. Ashton nodded half-heartedly while staying on his toes. He could never comprehend what this crazy woman could be thinking, thus he was trying to keep a safe distance from her. Then you can store the kit in your inventory rather than keeping it in your room. That way, you can use it whenever you need to. Thanks. I guess. Ashton mumbled and thought about the inventory space to open up and kept the first aid kit inside. As soon as he was done, the mistress spoke once again. This time it was a request to see his status plate. Well, it was more like a command than a request, and Ashton didn't want to cause any suspicion, so he did as he was asked. It wasn't like anyone else could see his full details. They can only see the details Ashton wanted them to see. Lucifer had already told him that much. Name: Ashton Fenrir. Species: werewolf. Class: unassigned. Age: 16 years. Gender: male. Grade: F. Tier: evolution is possible. Affiliation: werewolves. Level: 1. Stats: HP 1000/1000 damage, 14 armor, 12 stealth, 5 stamina, 15 agility, 14 intelligence, 2 nature. Bratty. Even Ashton was a bit surprised when he saw his new status plate. It looked a bit different than before, but it was probably because he didn't have all of his genes activated. Whatever the reason might be, it looked like the mistress was pleased with what she saw and instructed him to close the window. The kid has no special abilities and yet he was able to defeat a ghoul on the day his powers manifested. The mistress got lost in her thoughts. Did he get lucky or was it a result of his inherent skills? Not to mention, his powers manifested in just 4 days when it should have taken anywhere between 7 to 10 days. Guess, I'll have to ask him about it. So, how did you manage to defeat the ghoul? With the sword Donovan gave me. Ashton disinterestedly replied. Drop the attitude and be more specific. The mistress was controlling her urge to kick the crap out of him. If only he wasn't that important to her plan, she might have already done so. But she had to control herself or the kid might even refuse to answer her. The ghoul attacked me, I dodged, its skull broke, I stabbed him in the head with the sword. Ashton answered her as if he was trying to explain something to a toddler, that's how I killed it. Have you ever fought before? Or heard someone telling you about a ghoul's weakness? She asked yet another question. I might have heard the guards talk about it sometime. Blunt weapons are often used to kill them. To be precise, they are used to crush its head. The guards at the enclosure to talk a lot about these things. Seems like the boy is telling the truth. The mistress once again got lost in her thoughts. He doesn't have the inspect skill so it's unlikely that he didn't know about the ghouls already. Ashton had answered all of her questions, but there was one important question that she still needed to ask him. A question that would rid her of all her questions. What's the color of your blessing? The moment Ashton heard the question, Lucifer's words resurfaced in his mind. If anyone asks the color of your blessing, always say it's yellow. Not red, blue or black. Always yellow. Yellow. That'll be all for today. You can leave now. Mistress announced and kicked him out of her room before slamming the doors shut. Chapter 16. Dearest Pawn, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Donovan felt humiliated. Not because the mistress slapped him, but because she didn't even hear his side. What stung, even more, was the fact that she had never ever done that before. He knew Ashton was the most important key for her plan to succeed, but that didn't mean he couldn't teach the brat a lesson. That was his plan. Donovan wanted Ashton to feel misery and despair when he sent him away to the simulation room. Ashton would still have to fight against the ghoul, he would have felt the pain. Everything would have been real, except the ghoul. The simulated ghoul should have put Ashton in trouble and then Donovan would have magically reappeared and saved his life. That would have made the Mutt aware of the difference in their powers. This would have also ensured that Ashton would remain a bit docile towards him as he was his savior if nothing else. But all of his plans failed when the only thing that shouldn't have been real, turned out to be real. Not only that, by the time they realized something was off, the door refused to open as if someone was intentionally keeping them out. That's when the mistress arrived to check in on their progress. However, she immediately realized that the ghoul inside wasn't a simulated ghoul but a real one. Her rage was like nothing they had ever seen before. She, along with her elite guards, immediately tore the door open, but by the time they did, it was already over. Once the immediate threat was over, the mistress, rightfully so, lashed out on the man she trusted the most. There was a reason why she gave Donovan the responsibility to train Ashton. She was aware that there were multiple, if not just one spy in her court, who didn't want her plans to succeed. It was probable that one of them could have sabotaged the simulation room. Even though they weren't able to succeed in their plans, they managed to do something else, causing a trust issue between the mistress and Donovan. Since it was Donovan who went inside the simulation room, before sending Ashton in, it turned him into the prime suspect of string to kill Ashton. Once I find those bastards, I'll rip their entrails out with my bare claws. Donovan cursed before slamming the bottle of ancient liquor with his hand. They made the mistress lose her trust in me. I'll never forgive those pesky little spies for doing that to me. On the other hand, the mistress was busy thinking about what could have happened inside the simulation room. She wasn't thinking about the ghoul and how was it able to get inside, but how was Ashton able to defeat it. She believed him when he said that he had prior knowledge of how to kill a ghoul, but having the knowledge and executing it were two entirely different things. A scholar could have all the knowledge in the world and yet they wouldn't be able to defeat someone they knew the weakness of unless they possessed the skills to do so. It was the same with Ashton. He was a newbie. There was no way he could have gotten used to his new powers so easily, and yet he managed to defeat the ghoul with just a few scratches. That too with weapons that were the most unsuitable for accomplishing the task. It could have been possible for two reasons. One, the brat got lucky, or two, he was hiding something. The chances for the latter was very little, as the kid did not seem to be someone with enough brain cells to hide a secret. Even if he did, her all-seeing eye should have been enough to unveil the secret. After all, she already used it once to see whether the then 12-year-old Ashton had a blessing or not. And she even used it this time when she couldn't see any skill on his status plate. The all-seeing eye didn't show her anything special. Just that he had a couple of passive skills to help him out. Even then that didn't explain how was he able to defeat the ghoul, so she decided he must have been lucky. There couldn't be another reason for it. He is unique. However, I need to protect him till he set off for the academy. The mistress mumbled to herself before stripping down and entering the bathtub. It seems my father already has gotten a wind of my plans. Otherwise his spies wouldn't have taken such a drastic measure. But it's a shame that he turned out to be a yellow one. She continued, I was hoping he would at least be a red one, considering that he already had a blessing before being turned. Still, being yellow is not the worst for him, that too when he can evolve later on. I'll look forward to it, but for now, let's just give him the knowledge and strength my dearest pawn needs. Chapter 17. Night Adventure 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. As if fighting with creatures wasn't enough for him, the mistress decided to tutor Ashton about monsters and the werewolves as well. It was even worse that he already knew about those things about the monsters thanks to the system he had. But he couldn't tell that to the mistress. Yet, that didn't stop him from trying to do so by hinting at it when he asked her about an ability to know about things just by looking at them. She immediately scoffed and said in her decades of experience, she had never seen or heard about such an ability. She further added, if there was someone with an ability like that, they would probably be hunted down and imprisoned by the royal family. Anyone with a skill like that would be too precious to be felt alone. That was enough for Ashton to keep his mouth shut and silently take in whatever the mistress was teaching him. At first, he wasn't paying all that attention to her, but he soon realized there were things that the system couldn't teach him. Like about the society, the kingdom and various etiquettes that everyone followed by the werewolves in their community. Thanks to the mistress's training, he was able to know a lot of things about the kingdom they were living in. The kingdom of Lycania was said to be one of the 5 brightest stars of the eastern continent. By brightest stars, it meant that Lycania was one of the most well-off kingdoms on the continent. They were rich in minerals and resources as well as in technology. Despite all that, the kingdom was fairly small in comparison to the other 4 stars. One of the main reasons for it was the location of their kingdom. Lycania was surrounded by swamps located in the north, which also happened to be the only place their kingdom could possibly expand because Lycania was surrounded by sea on the other sides. The expansion of the country wouldn't have been so difficult if it wasn't for the fact that the swamps were heavily infested with night creatures. With their current military strength, they cannot afford to launch a full frontal strike on the monsters. The main reasons being their numbers and that they were much dangerous than any of them could expect. They initially tried to capture the swamps bit by bit, but that plan backfired because the night creatures kept attacking them relentlessly. In the end, the king had to order his men back and no one had ever dared to touch the swamps again. The answer to their problem was simple, they needed more combat-efficient people. But to make their population grow, they needed more land. Thus they were in a deadlock, unable to do anything. The king even put his pride aside and asked the other stars to help them out, but they didn't. The reason for doing so was never really clear, but a wise man could figure out the reason by themselves. The other stars fear what Lycaonia would be able to do if the only restriction that was stopping them from turning into overlords of the werewolves was lifted. In other words, they were already strong as they were and no one wanted them to get even stronger. So they didn't help them. That was the gist of it. The mistress kept babbling about a lot of other things, but Ashton's head was already saturated and he couldn't remember much after that. The mistress might have realized that and thus told him to go and rest for the day, as they were going to start early tomorrow morning. Man, this sure is taxing. Ashton yawned as he made his way back to his room, fight for 6 hours a day, learn stuff for about 10 more hours and sleep when you can. At least it's not as bad as I thought. The harder I train, the sooner I'll be able to take my revenge and set myself free from here. I wish I could train more and focus on these theoretical things less. Strangely enough, the mistress had also taken his physical training on herself as well. In fact, it had been a couple of days since that incident in the simulation room happened, and he hadn't seen Donovan ever since. Something must have happened between him and the mistress, but it wasn't like Ashton gave a shit about either of them. But it was thanks to that incident that now the room was strictly being monitored no matter whether Ashton was using it or not. Thus, no similar incidents happened either. All in all, things were going good for him. Except for the level of his werewolf form. Thanks to the strict training he was subjected to, his levels had risen quite a bit. He was currently at level 2, but he had already earned 47% of the EXP he required to level up again. However, the rest of his genetic forms were still stuck at level 0, and it was not a good thing. As Lucifer had already told him, the level gap between the genetics should never exceed 5. With the rate he was being trained, it wasn't going to be too long for him to cross the level 5 mark, and if he did cross the mark, then he didn't even know what would happen. All he knew was that Lucifer will be killed and he might as well. He couldn't let that happen. Not before he had taken his revenge at the very least. He also knew it was going to take a lot of time for him to do that because when he tried to check the mistress's level just like the ghouls, he couldn't see a thing apart from a single sentence. Your level is too low to view this individual's stats. I need to get strong, but first I need to balance my genes out. Ashton looked out of the window, into the night. Maybe I can do something about it. Tonight. Chapter 18. Night Adventure, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Werewolf genes were the easiest for Ashton to level up. All he had to do was to fight. He didn't need to sneak out in order to level up. He could just be himself and be able to level up. No one would have batted an eye on him for that. However, the same wasn't true in the case of leveling up the rest of his genes. As far as he remembered, he would have to consume the flesh and blood of monsters or any other being, to level up the zombie and the vampire genes in his body. He had already tried eating cooked meat, but that didn't seem to have any effect on him. It was the same with blood. He knew it because thanks to the attention the mistress was showering him with, he could have made anything that he liked. So of course, he wanted a blood broth made to test whether his vampire genes will get affected or not. And since he ate in his room, there was no risk of anyone finding out about his true form. It was an appetite-killing experiment and unfortunately, none of it worked the way he wanted. It appeared he would need to consume the things right from the source for his genes to activate. Obviously, it was just another one of his theories. However, it was time for him to put the theory to a test. However, he had to be careful about it. The werewolves had a sharp sense of smell. If he turned into a zompire outside his room, they might be able to trace him down. Ashton didn't want that to happen. The only reason he could freely turn into a vampire or a zombie inside his room was that no one visited him at odd hours. Unless it was the mistress's order. Thus he decided it was safer if he made his way out of the mansion as a werewolf, and once he was out of their reach he would turn into a zompire and hunt. This was an ideal plan for another reason. Ashton was more or less confident in his ability as a werewolf, thus it would be easier for him to make his way out using his werewolf abilities rather than using other forms in which he wasn't confident. I still need to wait for a bit longer, till everyone is asleep. Ashton mumbled to himself while laying on his bed. I can fool the guards around the walls easily, but the guards inside the mansion are a different case altogether. He had checked the levels of the guards guarding the walls and the ones guarding the interior of the mansion. The wall guards had their levels between 5.10. It was a range Ashton could sneak past them. However, the guards on the inside had their levels ranged between 20.25. Ashton knew going against them would be a foolish decision. Moreover, even he could see their levels, he couldn't see their stats or abilities as their level was much higher than his. Thus he decided it would be best to sneak out when the guards weren't as active. That would be near sunrise though. That was the problem. The guards would only change shifts around 20.30 minutes before sunrise. It was the most ideal time for him to escape, but there was a slight problem with it. He was weak in sunlight as well. His pain tolerance was high enough to tolerate the pain caused by the sun when his vampire genes were inactive. But he wasn't sure how long he would last if the sun hit him and he was still a vampire. It probably won't be enough to kill him. Maybe. But he wasn't all that excited about the idea of accidentally exposing himself to sunlight. Also, the sunlight would weaken his stats a bit as well. Thus, no matter what, he had to get back into the mansion on or before sunrise. The time constraint was really driving him mad. Sneaking out of the mansion itself would take around 15 minutes, sneaking back in will also take around the same time. Then how could he find someone and hunt them down, level up and get back to the mansion in no time? Something like that was impossible in all senses. The only solution to this problem that came in Ashton's head was to risk leaving the mansion before the guards changed. It would be risky, but that way, he would be able to eliminate the time constraint he had. It's decided then, Ashton thought to himself and jumped out of the bed. I'll leave the mansion within the hour. The mistress should be already asleep so she wouldn't order anyone to come to check on me now. But I don't have any weapons on me. How will I attack someone even if I find them? Guess, I'll have to make do with my hands. Chapter 19. Night Adventure, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Did I worry myself for no reason? Where the heck are the guards? Ashton thought to himself while he slowly made his way out of the mansion. The mansion was ominously silent. For the days he had spent there, this wasn't anything like he had imagined. Even though it had been a couple of minutes since he stepped out of his room, there was no sign of anyone. No guards, no maids, nothing. Ashton prowled the silent, dark halls like a true werewolf. His enhanced sight helped him look clearly even in the dark. He had seen the moon shining brightly from his room, but all of the drapes had been drawn in the halls so there was no light. It isn't full moon today. There shouldn't be a reason for them to be hiding away like this. Or is it something that I am not aware of? Ashton didn't know much about the werewolves. He thought full moon was their only natural weakness, but it didn't seem to be the case. If it was, then there definitely would have been at least a few of them prowling about the mansion. It's fine for me either way. If they are staying hidden, then it would be much easier for me to go out and hunt. Ashton slowly managed to make his way out of the mansion with ease. Although he could not turn into a full-fledged werewolf just yet, he had learned to convert his fingers into sharp claws and started climbing onto the wall that separated the rest of the city from the mansion. All of it seemed too easy, which even made Ashton think twice about his plan. But he still needed to level up his other genes, and this was the perfect opportunity to do so. He kept going on. He finally got his first glimpse of the city from the top of the walls. He did not want to admit it, but the place indeed looked beautiful. The city of Madden Creek was built in the center of a luscious, yet deadly forest. Mistress had already told him not to ever venture into the forest without proper security and equipment, as the forest was the home to numerous mutated beasts. The city itself was surrounded by high walls that Ashton could see just as easily as the rest of the city. In some distance, there was a mountain that was once a volcano but now lay dormant. However, the city was still reaping the rewards of the volcano's last explosion. The trade resources the volcano brought were of great importance to them and were used for a variety of purposes. But they were also influential when it came to architectural designs, as the vast majority of buildings have been built not just to withstand a volcano, but with elements and shapes of a volcano. The skyline was littered with unique skyscrapers, and they seem to be continuously evolving as new additions are added even then. Thanks to the mistress's leadership, the city was still evolving into a city of the future. Enough gazing, let's get going before someone gets suspicious. The entire point of Ashton escaping the mansion was for him to hunt something down. Instead, he felt as if he was being played. Just like the mansion, not a single soul could be seen anywhere. It was as if he was walking through a ghost town. Where is everyone? Ashton mumbled to himself, and as he did, he heard something behind him. The next moment a weird smell filled his nostril and he instinctively jumped sideways. The following moment, an arrow was buried where he was standing. He turned around and saw a couple of people standing behind him. Just with a look, Ashton realized they were werewolves. But vampires. There was no mistaking it, as their dead skin glowed in the moonlit sky. Both of them were wearing black clothing which completely covered their torso and legs. Ashton was able to guess they were vampires because of their sleeveless hoodies. In their hands, they each had a crossbow, while a sword was strapped across their back. All in all, it looked like they were out for a hunt. And Ashton was their prey. Oh, looks like these mutts left someone behind for us to hunt after all. A feminine voice echoed in Ashton's ears as one of them removed her hoodie, and here I thought Natalia wasn't going to let us kill any of her precious citizens. Looks like she is not as stubborn as we thought. The vampire next to the woman lifted his hoodie up as well, and here I was thinking we would have to complain to the king about his daughters. Unwelcoming behavior. Why are you standing there like a fool? The raven-haired female vampire barked at Ashton. Start running. Hunting is no fun if the prey gives up so easily. Chapter 20. Hunter Hunted, 1, you are listening at Novel Full.audio. 2 vampires against 1 adolescent werewolf. It was no surprise that the vamps liked the odds. They were there to hunt according to the treaty with the king of Lycania. They would help them with taking care of the night creatures, and in return, the king will have to allow them to hunt some werewolves once every 6 months. Of course, the king wasn't foolish enough to let the vampires hunt freely in his domain. Thus he imposed a restriction stating that the vampires will be able to hunt only in groups of 2, and they will only kill the werewolves who would be prowling about in the dead of the night. On top of that, they will have to stick to a certain province or city for a certain hunt. Since these rules almost made it impossible for the vampires to hunt, the king was kind enough to impose another rule. If the vampires were not able to find any prey, the kingdom of Lycania would give them half a dozen humans as compensation. Werewolves had a lot of humans in possession, thus they could afford to lose a few of them. After all, they could always force those pests to mate again and again and produce more offspring. This time it was the turn of the people of Madden Creek. That was the reason why none of them was outside. Because they already knew about the hunt. However, the mistress had not bothered enough to tell Ashton the same, as in her eyes, Ashton never left his room in the first place. But now he was outside. Running from the vampires as they shot arrow after arrows at him. Just me and my rotten luck. Ashton cursed under his breath. I wanted to be the one to hunt someone, not to be hunted down. For additional speed, Ashton had transformed his foot to resemble those of werewolves as well. But that was the extent of his transformation skill. He hadn't mastered the skill completely. It wasn't because that he didn't want to, but due to his inability to do so. He might have had the genes needed to transform into a werewolf, but it requires time and practice to do it correctly. One little mess-up could lead to his insides turning into mashed potatoes. That was the reason why the mistress had been teaching him to slowly transform one part of his body into that of the werewolves. You sure can run fast. But can you dodge this? The female vampire shot an arrow at him once again, but thanks to his perception skill, he managed to dodge the arrow once again. His blessing finally helped him a bit by deciding to give him some crucial information. Type: bloodsucker species. Vampire status. Wild mercenaries class. Hunter age. 60 gender. Female grade. E.tier affiliation. Vampires, good relationship, werewolves, familiar, level. 10 stats. HP, 2300/2300 damage. 45 armor. 55 stealth. 39 stamina. 55 agility. 15 intelligence. 29 nature. Warmonger. Damage dealt using weapons increases by 5% after every successful hit. Abilities/skills/spells. Flight, blood, feast, perception, mid-tier, summon. Underling praying hour remark. The most common forms of vampires in the world. These are not full-fledged vampires, but underestimating them because of that reason has led to the demise of a lot of unfortunate souls. They are often referred to as grunts amongst the vampire ranks. These creatures often travel in groups of two, either with their siblings, their mate, or in some cases, both. Talk about weird. Vampires are highly secretive, which leads to them often mating within their own families to keep their blood pure. As for its weakness, using light-based spells or enchanted gear are the quickest way to take them down. If you don't possess either of those, then you are most likely fed. Even werewolf claws aren't much effective against them. However, it doesn't mean they are invincible. Vampires can hurt and even kill others of their kind no matter how hard their skin is. Only a vampire can defeat other vampires if they don't possess mana or enchanted gears. What did I do to deserve to be chased around by level 10 vampires? Ashton cursed himself and rushed into a seemingly empty building. I need to turn my vampire genes on, but I can't do that while I'm busy running away from them. The flying bloodsuckers came to a halt as soon as Ashton entered the building. They were not allowed to get inside a building to hunt someone. However, the king's orders were not all that conclusive. He never told us what to do if a prey hid inside a building, did he, Mara? The male bloodsucker asked his counterpart with a savage smile on his face. You are right, Jacob. He didn't. The female replied with an equally satisfying smile on her face. With that in their minds, they entered the building. But as they did, they realized that the scent of the werewolf had disappeared without a trace. It was as if their prey had disappeared completely. Watch out. Jacob pushed Mara aside from an unknown threat. The next moment, there was a claw mark in the place where Mara was standing. Who the FCK? Mara mumbled as an outlandish white-haired kid walked in front of them.